We're again have an interesting presentation. On the text, what did it say was the title?
Alpha males.
Alpha males. Yeah. So, and you may wonder why we and we're going to show how that spiritually and find that we actually need guests, so obviously we want to get to know everyone and also make everyone feel as welcome and as feel as possible, because that's what we want to is all about. And it'll be an interactive presentation. Well, let's say slightly interactive. You're going to be on camera. Don't let that phase you. You'll be cool. So today's presentation is about alpha males, and we're going to explore also the whole idea of where we get our ideas from in a more general sense, okay? And this has a lot of very practical ramifications because we want to give you or share with you one big secret today, right? One big secret. It'll be a very simple point, but if we are able to grasp this point, it'll have huge benefit for you throughout your entire life, okay? A huge benefit, I promise you that, yeah? But before we get into the presentation of alpha males, we're going to do like a little bit of an icebreaker, just so we get to know each other a bit better. What I'm going to do, let's see, what kind of icebreaker is good? Okay, the first thing we need to do, even though people are eating, I'm going to ask you, oh no, it's okay. I'm going to ask you to actually, did we do the birthday? Okay, so did we do one or two? Did we do one?
Yeah, once. You did primary numbers, right?
No. Like, I got you to get a stand up and go in terms of birthday.
We've done a birthday and then we've done, I think, height.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, I just like doing those two. Alright, we'll do this. I'm gonna get, do we have pen and paper? Or not?
I don't.
That's okay, okay. Everyone has your mobile phones, right? Okay, you can get your mobile phones. Get your mobile phones. Or you can write it down like on the notepad if you want. Okay. It's just a little exercise that you may find interesting and insightful. Some of you may have done it before, but for those who haven't, you may find it quite interesting. A friend of mine came across this exercise years ago. It's actually a bit of a personality kind of game or reader, and it can give you a little bit of an insight into something about yourself and about your life. Just as an intro also for those who are here for the first time, so Launchpad, the whole idea of Launchpad is to bring together people who are young, intelligent, dynamic, and who also understand and can appreciate that there's more to life than just a 9-to-5 way of doing things. So really, and we make no bones about it, Launchpad is about being dynamic, it's about personal development, it's about being intelligent, it's about growth, and it's also about spirituality. Especially how to use Eastern spirituality within our lives and how to grow or develop our own spiritual side as well. Yeah? So all those dimensions are taking place in the Launchpad sessions. So we include discussion, interaction. We share specifically what's called the Vedic insight into things, which means we're drawing on Eastern literatures like the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and helping us to appreciate their insights into what's going on in the world and how we can be fully optimal as individuals, fully happy as well. And this exercise will kind of give a bit of a realization. So the idea is this: I'm going to ask you to visualize something, okay? And as you write down what you visualize or come across in this little exercise, at the end of it, I'm going to explain the meaning of the different aspects of the exercise, okay? So you may find that this is anyway, let's do it now. We'll talk more about it at the end, okay? Now, once we've done the exercise, we're going to pair up, and you don't have to share what you wrote, but something about what you experienced, if you felt the exercise was accurate or not, you know, if there were any insights that you thought you would like to share with people, that's also there. Okay, so the first thing is you can actually close your eyes to do this. I want you to imagine, okay, that you're on a road. Okay? I want you to imagine that you are on the road. Just let your mind's eye bring that vision or that image into your mind, okay? Imagine that you are on the road. And really be aware of what comes into your mind's eye when you imagine that. What kind of road is it? What type of day or night is it? You know, what are you doing on the road? Are you alone? Is there someone else there? Is it a hot or humid environment, atmosphere, or is it cold? What's going on? When you imagine that you're on the road, what do you see? Is there noise in the background? Who else is there with you? Are you alone? Is there traffic? Whatever it is, really look around and observe what comes into your mind when you visualize that, and then write that down or tap that onto your phone as a little note for yourself. Okay, so that's number one. Okay, so if everyone quickly does that. Everyone done that? As much as whatever detail you see, if you get it down, it can really do something for you. You're very, very powerful. Okay. Now, if you close your eyes again and go back to that road, I want you to imagine that as you're going along the road, you come across a cup, right? C-U-P. You come across a cup. Okay. Now, again, in your visualization, look at it. How big is the cup? What's in the cup? If there's anything in it, you know, what's the cup made of? And what do you do with that cup? Okay, so in your mind's eye, really pay attention to what happens. You came across a cup. What does it look like? How big or small is it? What is it made of? What do you do with it? Okay, and write that down for number 2, please. Okay, now the final part, you go back into your visualization. I want you to imagine that as you go further down the road, you come across a key, K-E-Y, you come across a key. Again, what is the key made of? Is it doing anything? Where is it? Exactly what type of key is it? And what do you do with it in your visualization? Okay, has everyone done that? Okay, I'm going to explain the meaning of those 3 aspects, okay? So in this visualization, this little insight exercise, the first image I asked you to imagine that you're on a road, okay? Now, that road and that whole vision that you came up with is meant to represent your present life at the moment, okay? So what you saw in that image when you were on the road is meant to be symbolic of your life at this present moment in time. Okay. Did anyone feel that it was actually symbolic in some way? Yes or no? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, good. Interesting exercise. You can do this with your friends, by the way. Just not to tell them at the beginning what they're getting into. Okay. As you go further down the road, you came across a cup. Asked you what the cup was made of, what did you do with it, okay? And then that second part is meant to represent your feelings about relationships or love. Okay? Okay? That's interesting. And the third part, as you go further down the road, you come across a key. That key and what you do with it is meant to be representative about your feelings about education. Yeah? So raise your hand if you felt in some way, shape or form it was in some way insightful or representative. Anyone? Okay. Some and some no. Okay, it's interesting. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. So it's a little personality thing, so you have to see whether it works for you. But what we'll do, one last thing we'll do now. Yeah, let's do it like this. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, because Michael's filming. We're gonna do a little bit of a switch. Okay, so if you guys come forward in a line here, if you guys face opposite in a line here, okay. So you're facing one like so. One person's facing another person like that. You can come a bit. That's fine. You can actually come a bit closer so you can actually. You're opposite the person you're going to speak to. So if you come down this side, so you're opposite, see wall, and then be like that. You're like that. Okay. So then what you'll do is, if you're opposite someone,
we need one more person opposite. Just.
Oh. Okay.
And then it's in pairs.
What? No, you come up. If you come up.
Yeah,
to,
one just come.
Yeah, the other side. Yeah. That's fine. So then you're opposite. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. You can sit opposite. Yeah, that's fine. You're gonna get to move around anyway. It's okay. Yeah. Okay, so I don't even need to say anything because I know you guys are already. But the idea is that what we're gonna do, we're gonna actually do it so that people switch places in a second. But whoever you're opposite, if you don't know them, just introduce yourself, say hello, and then share something that you may have found insightful from the exercise. And if you didn't find anything, if nothing in there was representative, then what I'd like you to share is something that you learned recently, right? Either about yourself or about life. Some kind of, what we're going to have here is some kind of wisdom or insight exchange, okay? So you have a choice, actually, all of you. You can either share something from the exercise we did, or something that you've recently learned or picked up, either about life or about yourself, okay? And I'm going to give you a very strict time limit. I'm going to give you a minute, then I'm going to switch you, so you're speaking to someone else in a minute, then you switch to someone else in a minute. So it's like speed dating, yeah, like that. Okay, so your time starts. Oh wait, sorry. Speed wisdom. I like that. Yeah, speed wisdom. Speed wisdom. I'm going to actually see if I can actually go. There's a website called Online Stopwatch.
Oh yeah.
Of course.
So let's go on to I'm going to set this up just so you know.
I'll do it in 1 minute together, so it's 30 seconds.
Okay, so your time, so it's set. Your time starts now.
Okay, you got that.
Switch! By actually exploring, just generally, before we get into the topic specifically about alpha males, I'm going to ask all of us to share the answer to a particular question. So, generally, where do we get our ideas of masculinity from?
Media.
So, you said media? Okay. So one area is the media. Where else do the ideas come from? In other words, if you ask the average young kid, what's masculine? They have some idea. Where did they receive that from? Or is it something they completely made up by themselves? Where did it come from?
Culture.
So one at a time. Culture. Okay, so you mentioned media, we've got culture. Anthony, you said?
Yeah, so role models, specifically I'm thinking maybe about a father model. That'd be a main point of reference for most people.
Okay, interesting. Role models like the father. Anyone else? The idea of masculinity, where does that come from? Yes,
TV and films, and kids might even get it from cartoons.
Okay.
We also get it from our parents who have got it from their parents, who have got it through their culture, who have got it through even religion.
Okay, so you've got here Media, TV. We've got role models, especially the father, culture, cartoons, parents, religion. Okay, I've got culture twice. Okay, anywhere else? Anywhere else? Yes, sorry.
Society, but it might cover a little bit.
Yeah, but in a particular aspect of society that you think brings it out? Is there a particular area that you feel?
For me, I think it's like, you know, when you walk around like Westfield or something and the way you're looking at everyone, so I don't know what that means.
So your observation. That's interesting. Okay. Yes.
Friends.
Okay.
The body language
Friends and peers. Right, so remember, we're looking at where do our ideas of masculinity come from? Yes.
Sometimes through books.
Okay, good.
Maybe rarely then.
Okay, anyone else? Anyone else have anything to share? Okay, so what you guys have said is our idea of masculinity can come from our friends and peers, media and TV role models, culture, cartoons, parents, religion, observation and books, right? It's very, very interesting how ideas spread, right, in society. And one of the most interesting things about it is the fact that if something is not consciously understood, if it bypasses the intelligence, if it's not ever really thought about, it actually makes that idea in some ways more powerful, right? In the Vedas it talks about how within us we have not just a physical body, but we have a subtle body made of the mind and the intelligence. The idea is that the intelligence is like, it's like a bouncer at a nightclub, right? The bouncer stands at the door, certain people get in, certain people don't get in. You understand what I'm saying? So, if the bouncer's strong, then the guest list stays intact. Only people who are on the list get in. If the bouncer's weak, people can sneak past the bouncer and enter into that club and cause all kinds of trouble, right? One of the aims of Launchpad as a group is to make the bouncer strong, by bringing up and examining those things which are normally taken for granted, right? And what we want to try and do today is give you a whole new way of looking at masculinity, okay? A different take on the whole idea of masculinity. So you mentioned a few ideas about where masculinity comes from, which is actually the first thing on the slides, actually. So, yeah. So we have ideas, and they come from somewhere. It is considered that sometimes the most powerful negative trends in society come because people push ideas without even having an avenue to really explore them. And I would argue that for the vast majority of people, they've accepted loads of ideas which they've never actually checked whether they're true or not. It's a very, very serious point. If someone accepts something without checking, and that thing that they're accepting is unhealthy, for example, it means that there could be huge problems in that person's life. It could create issues for their relationships. It can create issues for their career, right? And ultimately, it can create issues for their happiness, right? Think about this as a formula. If you have an idea which goes completely against reality, right? Which is completely out of touch with reality, what could be the problem? What could be the results of that? Right? There was a presentation that Kundalatra and Michael did. I think you used this image. You had an image of a girl standing in front of a mirror, right? And the girl's actually very thin, isn't it? Right? Yeah, she's anorexic, but she thinks that she's fat. So she's looking in the mirror, and when she looks in the mirror, she sees a very, very big, obese person, but she herself is extremely thin. So what's happening there is you've got the reality of how the person looks, and then on the other hand, you've got what she thinks, the idea that's going on in her head. Do people act according to reality, or do we act according to what we think about it? What would you say?
Perception of reality.
Perception of reality, yeah.
Exactly. So actually speaking, if someone controls perception, they control the reality for that individual. And then you can take it further. If someone's in touch with reality, that means that person's very grounded. They can be most effective in dealing with the world because they know what's really going on, as opposed to what they're being told to believe. Does that make sense? So we want to explore that concept a little, and we want to give you some key points around this. The idea is that if we get these key points today and really work with these key points, you'll come more in touch with reality. You'll be more effective in how you deal with reality. You can examine those things, you know, those nightclub guests who got past the bouncer. The bouncer can go into the club, right? The club is like the mind, and see those people, and if they're no longer useful, get them out. Right? Get out. Yeah. So the first point we really want to bring in mind is that we have ideas about reality. Those ideas have come from somewhere, just like you get this list. The idea of masculinity hasn't just dropped out of the sky, it's come from somewhere. If that idea is based upon reality, it's very powerful. If that idea has come from the wrong sources or people who don't know, we could be in some serious trouble. Okay? So just hold that thought for now. Now, we're talking about alpha males in particular. So we've got a few potentials here, right? A few potentials. When I was researching this, there was one site which had like a list of, actually no, when I was researching it, I put into Google alpha males and then clicked on images. And so these are some of the people that came up. Now, whether you personally think they're an alpha male or not, let's start with an exploration of why. Let's say, would we agree that people would say, a lot of people would say, yeah, these guys are alpha males? Yeah? Yes or no? I think we'd agree that, at least in the general perception, many people would say. Whether we think they are or not, that's a different issue. Let's explore, first of all, what an alpha male is in the general conception. You may have your own idea, that's fine. Yeah? But let's start by exploring what's the general concept of an alpha male. And what I'll do is, I'm just going to take this, so we can wipe these off. Because we make the first point, which is that we have our ideas and they come from somewhere. We don't necessarily create the ideas ourselves, but they've come from somewhere, and in many cases they've been accepted consciously or unconsciously. Now, how do we define, or why would people say that a certain person is an alpha male?
Power.
Okay, so who said power? Okay, can you elaborate on that? What do you mean?
Because they're seen as, how to explain this? I had it in my mind 2 seconds ago. Because they're seen as iconic, and because everyone knows them, and because they have that power, the money, and the influence, the fame as well, and the media. They basically have a voice, and when you have a voice, either good or bad, you have the key to control people's minds. Okay, so one aspect, and I'll add that because you said voice. This is very interesting. We're going to get into that. So why else would people see? This is just like a little snapshot. There could be many other persons, but why would people see people like these to be alpha males? Yeah.
That's adding to what Olivia said, that they're superior to other men. Like as a whole. At the top of the game, and they're like, sound cliche, but hunter-gatherer idea, that kind of. Because they're like that prominent, you know, they have more power to do that, you know, to kind of be like.
They even consider us demigods nowadays, those guys. They're so high up, you can't, you know.
So they consider to be very, very high ranking, also to be, as you said, hunter-gatherer, superior. Yes?
Very driven and ambitious.
Okay, so driven and ambitious. You guys, I want to get everyone's comments in. Anyone else? Yes?
They seem to reach the pinnacle and have acquired all that is desirable. Well, they have all of the assets. They've got the wealth, they probably have the women, they probably have all of the facets attached to that, so they are the kind of the pedestal there, what everyone's aspiring for. So
okay. Did you just sigh? Did you go?
I was trying to think of the words. It wasn't in desperation.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you for that. Someone else? Yes, for Charlie.
They're pioneers in some sense.
interesting.
So they.
No pioneer.
No, everyone can share their thoughts.
No, I agree. Like, as in they've got their own agenda, and like, I mean, like George Clooney's on the whole development agenda, and Brad Pitt, he's following George.
Yeah. Okay, is there anything you wanted to add? That's good.
They're leaders of some kind of ideal, or some kind of.
Yeah, they've got icons.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, definitely mentioned icons. Anyone else? Yes, anything else?
They're good looking. Good looking.
Okay.
Allegedly.
That as, like, for women, that's like a thing. Like,
Oh, so they have the power to define.
Yeah, go.
To be an alpha male, like, I think to some degree, like, same with celebrities, you have to be quite good looking or out there in a certain way. And I think they're good looking guys.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And physically attractive.
Okay, so physically, okay, so we've got good looking, physically attractive, according to society standards, okay. Interesting. Anything else? Yes, Kay.
I think women are attracted to them because of all of these things. Like, even if they weren't good looking, all these other things would make them good looking to women. So I don't know. Yeah. So I think it's what as you said, like we have the power to define what good looking is. I think that makes sense.
Interesting. That's good. B?
It seems that, I mean, I would think that there's some self-absorption because they're so driven and want to really push themselves forward. Maybe they wouldn't mind trampling on others to get ahead.
Okay. When you say self-absorbed, do you mean like vain or?
No, not in an outside way
Mm-hmm.
in terms of their appearance. So they might be like that, but more kind of because they're so concerned with themselves. They're so focused on getting ahead, on attaining that, getting to that pinnacle, that they might be a bit more self-absorbed.
Okay, so let's look at this. I'm going to link this to what I think Paul said earlier. So you have these ideas of alpha male. So what you've come up with is some of the ingredients. Sorry, not Paul. Anthony, sorry. I've been doing that all week. I had a friend called Colin. I called him John. That's what food does to you. So I'm going to link this to what Anthony said. Because these guys, do you feel that there are many people for whom these guys are role models?
Yeah.
So this is very powerful. Right? This is a concept that we really want to bring out. Those people that we admire, according to the Vedas, which is like an ancient Eastern body of knowledge, when we empathize and relate to a certain individual and admire them deeply, it actually also has some impact upon our own mind, our own consciousness, and we take on a certain degree of that person's qualities. These are what you could consider subtle laws. Sometimes you see that when people have been together for a long time, they start to look like each other slightly. Have you ever seen that? Yeah?
It's like
isn't that interesting?
looking like their dogs.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, sometimes you've got people who've got pets and they're so into their pets, and after a while you're not sure who's the pet and who's the pet owner. It's serious. But there's a science behind that. Aye. There's a science behind that. You know? Thank you for coming. Okay, this is Charlotte, by the way. Charlotte's also here for the first time. Nice to meet you. So we're speaking a little bit about alpha males, and we wanted to share this. This is a metaphysical principle. See, one of the great things about Launchpad and the knowledge that we're sharing is that we're taking it from the Vedic sources which give additional insights. There are certain things about the world and about reality that are not so easily observable in a very external way, but you can gain the insight from higher sources of knowledge. So in the Vedas, in the Bhagavad Gita, for example, it talks about the mind, the intelligence, and what's called the false ego. So what happens is the mind, or the subtle body, is shaped or developed by what we think about, what we meditate on. And then the gross physical body, it adjusts around the subtle body. So if someone is always meditating or thinking about a particular type of person, then because they've shaped their subtle body by their thinking around that individual, then the gross body starts to adjust a bit, adjust a bit, adjust a bit. And so over time, that continuous meditation means the person's physical body also changes. To some degree. Yeah, to some degree. So this is something to bear in mind. If we have a certain idea of masculinity, and if those ideas are very strong and many people gravitate towards that idea, see, you can imagine like an average teenager looking at George Clooney thinking, oh, women find him really attractive. Now, externally to his male friends, he's not going to say anything like in admiration. He's going to say, well, I don't think he's so attractive. What do they like about him? But in his mind, he's thinking, I'd like to dress like that. Yeah. George Clooney does this, I think the guys know what I'm talking about. So they start to meditate on that individual, and you'll see, if you watch carefully, you'll see that sometimes they've seen something cool that some star has done, and they'll try and incorporate that into their own, they're trying to install that in their own kind of lifestyle. George Clooney looks like this, so I'm going to do a little bit, I'll sway a little bit when I'm walking as well. Yeah? Normally the guys don't tell the women this, right? Normally women don't know about these things, but we're going to share this today, yes.
It's going to be purified.
Yes, yeah. That's a good example. So Kun was saying, if you could say that again, please.
It's just like David Beckham's hair, so there was like different phases, whatever haircut he had after it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's true, wasn't it? Yeah, it was very clearly the case.
That's why there's so many kids called David nowadays. So many boys called David.
Yeah. One time, when I think it was in the 90s, there was an R&B group called Jodeci, right? So the lead singer, the head of the group, his name was Devontae Swing. So because he was so popular amongst the women, like many of the women, when they had kids, they would always call their son Devontae. Seriously. Yeah, it was a really big thing. So if you ever meet someone they called Devontae, you know where that came from. That's a little tip there. Okay, so we've looked at this and we understand that this seminar is not just about alpha males in particular, but it's about the power of ideas. Right? And how something which is subtle, it affects and leads those things which are more external and gross. Right? So if someone is able to influence the subtle, then the gross will follow. That's actually what goes on. People think it's about the money and so on, but if you influence people's minds, then the money comes. Right? Then these other things come. But obviously, it has to be done in a way which is positive, and that's progressive for everyone. If it's done in an unhealthy way, that's very negative. And we're going to touch upon how it can be unhealthy in some way in a moment. So there's a lot of confusion sometimes about an idea or a concept. I want to give you guys this. We've got about 9 sheets, but in the room we've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 people. Okay. So maybe you can look, because I'm going to pass these out. These are what are called the laws of the alpha male. Okay, it's actually quite the print's very light because the print was running out of ink. But in your groups you can look at it. So if you come over into groups, you're together, and there's 3 sheets. Would you like to join? Yeah, like that. So I think you can have 3 groups of 4, something like that. Yeah, so 3 groups of 4. So if someone would like to, so maybe Conchal, do you want to join that group and then also, like that? So have a look through. This is a bit of a parody, but to be honest, when I found this online, the person who wrote it, he had these laws of the alpha male. So this is actually, you can imagine there'll be some men who are looking online and they're reading this and they're thinking, okay, I want to be an alpha male. Right? No, seriously. I want to be an alpha male. I want to be dominant. I want to be powerful, etc., etc. How do I need to behave? Okay. So just to give you a little bit of a heads up, let's read through 1 or 2 of them as a group. Could you read the first one, please? This group, number 1.
Let's do it chorally.
No. Loud, nice, loud voice.
Chorally, yeah, chorally. In harmony. No.
So what's the first one?
Always take up a lot of space.
What? On the train?
Go.
Beta males oystering cup as if they were apologizing for their own personal waste of space.
Okay. The last line of that sentence.
Wait.
Be territorial.
Be territorial. Claim it because you own it.
Okay. Now that sounds funny, But I guarantee you, there are some men who read that and thought, that's how I should be. Right? I'd be out of my, sprawl out, make sure you take as much space as possible. Yeah, seriously, you have to do that, right? Exactly. So this is what I'm saying.
There's no shame in being polite.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that in a second. You're going to say, Mike?
Yeah, I was going to say, even in like some body language books I wrote, the more space the better. So it's like, if you're like, like this is not so good, whereas you should, try and take 1.5 seats if possible.
Yeah. I remember seeing a TV program, and there was one guy from a boy band, and he was there with his friend. And it was very interesting because he was just sprawled out, and it's like, I'm God's gift, the whole kind of energy and the whole kind of vibe was like that. Oh my gosh. It's interesting. So let's have one from this group. Maybe a second one?
Yeah. So stress. Talking about it or showing it is an indicator of beta male status. Be unaffected by what others are affected by. Heat, sweat, cold, stress. Leaders are aloof and confident.
I like the way you said that. Group number 3.
Slow down body movements, visualize moving in a pool, relax your eyelids. Am I doing the right one?
Yeah. I'll give an example of slow down body movements.
Relax.
I remember seeing someone, and you know this one, right? And so, he's walking, and actually he was standing, and I think someone called him, so he was like, So the idea was that I'm an alpha male, honey. It's okay, I'm gonna save you, But people do that. Now, the reason why I've given those sheets, and you should read through all of them, is because
this is a joke.
The idea is whatever the concept is, that will affect how people behave. Right? No matter who it is, people are affected by ideas, concepts. So there's a lot of funny ones in there, but I'd like you to read them all in your group and then think about how it would affect society or relationships if men actually en masse believed that and acted like that, okay? So you can discuss, and then each group's going to share, and actually we'll do it like in a very concise way. Each group will share 2 key points. Have more than 2, so that if any other group has shared something that you already have down, you can share something else. But read through that list as a group, and then consider if men really all as a group believed that and acted in that way, how would it affect society as a whole? How would it affect relationships in general, okay? We'll give you 5 minutes, go.
What was
You may want to give each one a sheet, then switch over. It's also okay.
I think number 5. I agree with number 5. Number 5 is stop trying to please everyone and make him or her like you. Stop qualifying everyone. Don't take which is true. If people are cool, you're going to hang out.
Very impersonal environment.
People are uncool. It's not like choose to be a kind of to everyone. It's like, don't go mental trying to get everyone to like you. That's what I would say.
You may find some funny ones.
Don't be that guy.
Smile less often. What?
It doesn't make you rude, just... Oh my god, this is...
Give them as rewards when people bring you progress.
You know what this ends up as?
No,
people giving really fake smiles.
When someone does
just
like
Also,
they're all like all the time, and then they're just like drop draw smile.
BBD. Also, there's a whole thing around. Let's say within 2 chairs there's a handle. There's a rest. There's an armrest.
Yeah.
So whoever gets it, that's supposed to be.
Oh, the dominant
character.
Yeah, it's bad, isn't it?
Remain silent every once in a while.
Really?
Number 12 is hilarious. Remain silent every once in a while after someone finishes talking. Look at them and wait. They will keep talking to make you feel happy.
What? This that's from a website. I actually took that from online.
I think
yeah, so
silent man is a wise man. Don't speak unless you need to.
Yeah.
Did you call
This
it?
is different concept. This is different.
Wait, this is just be silent.
Make strong eye contact. You don't have to
What did you say?
have a serious face. What does happen when you do this? That's
If someone
stupid.
says something, don't
Smile
But
But you know more than they do.
Make yourself comfortable.
What the hell? Another 17 hours.
I'm trying to put
Make them think we're from the future. Trends.
Yeah, you can feel
They don't know where they're coming.
I'm a joke.
So 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes.
That's quick.
Roll your island.
This is just
This
this
is
is an
raising
opportunity to I'm
sociopath.
not waiting to take control.
This is sociopaths, handle.
Loads of people just
Really bad.
and video
But
back
others
really said he was going to do
wondering
something.
if they're oppressing you or not.
Be talkative, say whatever is in your mind and don't worry about the consequences. Just be talkative.
You've got to be a model of what that would be like, just a tube. It's just really impersonal, like stifling environment. You just want to never feel comfortable. Never want to look at anyone else. And it's
I
just
bet all the people in New Jersey are like
other things as well. So.
They say have one which is gel your hair into eccentric shapes. So it's too long.
No, it's not.
It's going to keep thinking about the questions. You need to give them the best possible answer. Stop doing it. Don't walk too fast.
Okay, but you have to discuss. Maybe discuss just some of the key ones you've come across so far, because also with time, you want to be conscious of the time. So how will that affect people if this is actually the way that people behave? In other words, if this defines masculinity, if men took this on board en masse and said, okay, this is what it means to be a masculine person, and took that on board, what would be the effects? What would it mean? What would be the effects? You can share in your group, but then get down maybe 2 or 3 key points, and we're going to have each other feedback.
Slow down your way.
If you don't like the conversation, walk away.
Okay, actually, okay, let's just discuss this. Even if you haven't come up with key points in your group, because I think everyone's reading things. I can see the body language was like, what? So let's just share what we're thinking. So, who would like to begin? Let's just share. First of all, did anything on the list strike you as being something that people would actually take on board?
Yeah.
Isn't it? Very interesting. How did you feel about what was on your list? Any thoughts or feedback? Yes.
Yeah, well, in every exchange, I mean, I read the last page. It seems like even in social interaction, it's always about the man putting himself forward. So it's not really about the other person or connecting with them. It's about how they come across in that interaction. It's very self-centered.
Yeah. Very self-centered. Yeah, good. Someone else. What were your thoughts on what you read? Any other thoughts? Which particular one stood out for you? Let's say.
I read them, but it just sounded like a very I'm hollow inside, but let me try and make an external show of.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. Very strong, all about me, and actually quite superficial. Yeah, behavior. Yes, Michael.
Did someone read that? How you should stay silent once in a while.
Yeah.
So I was just I was just reflecting how showing emotion and facial expression is almost like a sign of emotional intelligence, which is usually like categorized as a weakness for a man. So it should sort of just be blunt or rock solid.
Now this is really important because you should know that there are some people who deliberately take these things on board, and Therefore, the way that they treat other people can be very negative, and they think that this is actually the right way to be, because this confers them a certain status, a certain power. So it's a real thing to bear in mind. Anyone? Who else had their hands up? Okay.
The one I thought that a lot of them just sound ridiculous when you actually break it down. The one about don't always answer when somebody calls you ridiculous. Ridiculous. Sounds like a school.
That just sounds rude.
Someone else? What were your thoughts? Other thoughts on anything?
Don't ever act apologetic. Don't use excuses or feel the need to explain your actions. Ever. That one was like, yeah.
This just made me think about watch the film. Which we watched it. It's called Tree of Life, and it has Brad Pitt in it. He plays the persona of a 1950s American dad, and he embodies that value to the core. Yeah. And he really tries to imbibe it to his kid, and tries to get this idea of masculinity through violence. Like, don't show him any love, because that's going to make him weak. Like, people exploiting this world. You have to imbibe these values.
It's like that song, A Boy Named Sue, by Johnny Cash, which is about a dad naming his son Sue. So that when he eventually left, because he's not a very good dad, he just leaves when the kids head to. And so that the son has to get tough or die, because the guy's going to make fun of him. And the only way to retaliate is to beat the guy up. So like defend him.
But there is a way out of that. That's a good point. But there is a way out of that. This is one of the reasons why we're doing this discussion. If there's a different understanding of masculinity that works better than the kind of ideas that people have in their minds, and be very clear, I'm going to say something which sounds a little bit like presumptuous, but these ideas which are on these sheets of paper, they're in the minds of every single one of us if we've been brought up in this society to some extent. Whether we consciously act on them or not, that's the point that we're trying to make. Right? The mind is permeated with ideas. To the extent that those ideas are in touch with reality, that makes a person effective, grounded, successful. To the extent that those ideas go against the nature, that can be the cause of a great deal of confusion, as we said here, and also unhappiness. Yeah? So really, it's something to really bear in mind. Okay, any other last thoughts, and then I'm going to go on and
there are some of these which I agree with to some extent, such as use clean language unless you really have to curse, which I would cut out the unless you really have to curse, but just use clean language. Yeah. Profanity is just like that, or violence, and use violence as a last resort is also a good one. Yeah, because you shouldn't be violent, unless like it's defense.
This one, that's good. Being in control is simple. It is only about believing fully in what you are doing. Believe that you have the best plan of action, and no one could possibly do better. You just think people in high positions, they abuse power. They don't like to manage people. You know what I mean?
See, and that brings in another point. See, there's a very fine line between being confident and being what?
Arrogant.
See, where do you draw the line? We want to give you something in relation to that, or like a consideration in relation to that. I'll actually say right now. You see, the thing is this: that statement that was read out by Sewell could be very powerful. If the person's confidence is not in their own idea, but is based upon having a profound understanding of what they should be doing, why they should be doing it, and doing it for a higher purpose. Right? There's a difference between being confident in ourselves in a very self-centered, egoistic way, and being confident that I'm doing something which is based upon a higher understanding of what I should be about in life, the meaning of life, and what I need to do if I want to become truly and lastingly happy. You see the difference? Because in one side, you've got confidence in yourself, and the other side, you've got confidence in a higher understanding of reality. Right? And if that confidence is in a higher understanding of reality, which has been checked and verified, then you can be pretty solid in your endeavor. Right? In other words, we're talking about wisdom. If I understand what life is about, the meaning of life and what I'm meant to be doing, right? And I do that, that puts me in an extremely powerful position. Does that make sense? But if I'm confused about who I am and what I should be doing, I have to settle for the bravado. I have to settle for showing off and projecting that I'm a big, strong alpha male, because deep down, I don't actually know what I'm doing. And eventually, if you're doing something that you're not meant to be doing, will it eventually come up?
No.
Yes or no?
Yeah, of course.
It will come up.
What?
If you're doing something that you're not meant to be doing, eventually you'll come into conflict with reality. Right? So this is why the Vedas, which is the ancient body of Eastern teachings, really try to give people an understanding of who they are, what life is about, and what we should be doing. Because if we understand that, it actually is it is considered to be the exclusive platform for lasting, unbreakable, and I mean unbreakable confidence. And anything below that, it can be the cause of those doubts. Because when I have an idea of reality which isn't based upon the truth, eventually things will start slipping. It's like, someone is married to someone and that person is having an affair. People tell them, your husband's having an affair. Oh, no, he's not like that. He wouldn't do that to me, etc. But eventually, if he's having an affair, it's going to come up, isn't it? Right? Because that's the reality. He is like that. So it's about coming into contact with and understanding the reality of something. Now, I want to introduce you at this point to a different way of considering things. This is the key point that I wanted to bring out through the seminar. So here we have this term, right? This term is a Sanskrit word and it's called Purusha, which means, it actually has many different meanings, but in this context, this actually means masculine, or the original masculine principle. Right? In the Vedas, it talks about, there's many different categorizations, but one is Purusha and Prakriti. Right? Purusha means like the male principle. Prakriti means the female principle. According to the Vedas, there's a completely different way of looking at masculinity. I'll say this honestly, I studied this before I even got married. Right? And I found it to be like an amazing window into a whole new way of looking at masculinity, looking at masculine and feminine interaction and how they work. Here, and this is the key point, the understanding of most spirituality or traditions or wisdom is that, you have the material world, and then we were all here, we as human beings are in the material world, and then we created families, and we created leadership, and we created parenting because we wanted to survive as a human race. The Vedas have a completely different angle on this. Right? According to the Vedic tradition, the entire creation is a reflection, a perverted reflection of a perfect creation. Right? A perfect world, a perfect environment in which eternally leadership is there. Eternally relationship is there. Eternally family is there. Eternally economics are there. Right? In other words, the idea is that man did not invent these principles of leadership, economics, relationships, masculinity and femininity, that they are eternal concepts. And what we have here is a reflection, a limited reflection of those eternal concepts taking place on the higher platform. Right? In other words, there is economics in this world because there's a perfect economic system on the higher platform. Right? The idea is that there's relationships in this world because there are perfect relationships on the higher platform. There's masculine and femininity in this world because there's perfect masculine form and perfect feminine form on the higher platform. In other words, it's not made up here. Now, if that's true, then you can consider this point, that the mechanics of masculine and feminine interaction, they exist on that perfect platform and you see them here, but as a reflection. So in other words, it's like if you understand how they work on that perfect situation, if you understand the mechanics of it, and you use those same principles here, will your relationships go well? Yes or no? Think about it. If there's such a thing as perfect masculine and feminine interaction, right? If the principles that make that work are going on somewhere in reality, if you understand what makes that work there, you can also make that work here. Yeah? Have I lost anyone? Yes or no?
Wouldn't that only work to like a limited extent?
It would work to a limited extent, but it would still work effectively to the best degree that it can here. Yeah. So what we're trying to bring out is that this is the understanding of the Vedas. Right? So therefore, this principle, this idea of Purusha or masculinity eternally exists. And who is that? Now that question comes up. So if there is this idea of eternal masculinity, then according to the Vedas, actually the Supreme Person himself is the ultimate or original alpha male. Okay, so we talked about the origin of everything. And here we have two personalities. We won't talk so much about this personality, although his name is Balaram, but this in the Vedic tradition is an image of Krishna. And Krishna is therefore considered to be the Purush, or the original male. Now therefore in the Vedas also, when it speaks about how he interacts with the feminine principle, then that science of how he deals with women, how he deals with the feminine principle, that is considered to be the perfect way that a male should also deal with a female and vice versa for that type of relationship to actually work. Right? Do you see where I'm coming from? In other words, the mechanics of how males and females interact are therefore considered to take place on the ultimate platform. And if we understand that and use it here, it gives you the best possible result between males and females. You know, just to use this kind of idea as an analogy. So here, it's not that masculinity is whatever you see on those sheets of paper, but it's actually something that's coming from the Supreme Person himself. Right? There's a very different way of looking at it. And the principle doesn't just apply to masculinity. Right? In the Vedas, there's many literatures on leadership, for example. If you go out into like a bookshop, there are thousands of books on leadership, right? And everyone has their own idea on leadership. So you have Alan Sugar, you know, well, I reckon you should just be harsh, rough, you know, teach him who's boss, that will get the best out of his staff. Then you've got someone else who's a leader who's quite soft, and you say, no, you've got to care about people, you know, care about their feelings, and be nice to them, smile at them in the morning, give them breakfast, and that's what will get the result. Everyone has their own theory. But this kind of understanding is that if you take the eternal principles, you'll get the best possible result in any particular area of life and any particular area of expertise. We're not going to go into leadership so much now, but I want to bring out one or two points about this idea of masculinity. So for example, in terms of Krishna's interactions with the feminine principle, he always acts with sensitivity towards those who he's around, right? In the material world, on your sheets, the idea of being a male is you should be very self-absorbed, very selfish. But that's considered completely wrong from this angle of vision, right? See, in other words, this idea is that masculinity is not Brad Pitt, is not what, you know, George Clooney happens to do in one episode of ER, or when he's, you know, on his last movie. From this angle of vision, masculinity is whatever the Supreme Person does because he's the original male. Right? And all other forms of masculinity have actually ultimately come from him. Right? Another principle is that if Krishna, it's actually considered, you can tell me what you think about this, that if Krishna's partner is angry, for example, he doesn't blow a fuse and then start telling her off and, you know, what are you angry for, you know, what are you upset for, you know, I'm the man, you know, sort yourself out, love. No. Instead, he becomes actually very humble. Because it's considered that that's the best way to deal. That if the feminine principle is angry, the masculine principle should take the humble position, and that will bring the best situation or the best resolution to that, you know, this, let's say, disagreement or disharmony. Yeah? In other words, these things can be seen in what's called Leela. Leela means that the Supreme Person, when he engages in his pastimes, if you catch how he behaves and the principles that he uses, and if that's used properly in relationship, then you get the best possible result in the relationship. Yeah? Do you see where I'm coming from? Yeah? Anyway, just throw that out there for your consideration, because also I know that our time's a little short. So, at that point, let's see what questions anyone has. Yes?
I was just thinking, as an expert, maybe not everything, but you know some of the things on here?
Yes.
Could you go through what the actual...
Sure,
has,
sure.
Like how
okay.
how the alpha male would react and
Sure. Should we do it now, or yeah? Okay, why don't we do this? If you read out, let's try this as an exercise. If you read out one that particularly strikes you, then we'll actually try and share how, from the Vedic perspective, that interaction or that behavior should be done, as opposed to what's given on that piece of paper. Would anyone like to begin? Would anyone like to choose one that they find particularly interesting? Yes.
Don't react when people call your name. And when you eventually do react, only slowly turn your head towards them.
Yeah. Okay. So
I remember.
there's actually a thing. There's a thing in advertising, and I was reading about this recently. And their idea is that if people like you, they're more likely to buy your product. That's why in advertising it said that's why in terms of advertising certain kinds of goods, there's certain products which they won't use stars to advertise. They'll use someone who's very likable, down to earth, who people can relate to, because they find that they're actually able to get more sales. So this idea that if people speak to you, turn away, ignore them, and it shows your position, it does actually work if the person's insecure. You see the point? But the thing that they don't understand is, according to the Vedas, there's a whole system of karma. So what Vedas are speaking about is sustainable success. Any attempt to abuse people means that you can, at best, and that's at best, get a short-term result, but that same karma will slap you in the face later on. So today, the person who's trying to act like they're better than other people, that's the same individual who in a future situation will be ignored, ridiculed, put down. So it's not a sustainable result, even if it looks like the person's getting away, because there are people like that, isn't it? There are people, when you speak to them, they just try and act like, you don't exist, I'm more important than you. And that's the real problem in society. That they're not aware that what we're seeing at any one point is like one image or one section of a big movie. Right? Someone gave the analogy, they said that they used to sneak into the cinema through like a back entrance to see films for free. So they sneaked in one time and they caught like a film from the middle. And in this section of the film, they actually caught the film at the end, right? So at the end scene, you get this guy who's being put like onto an electric chair and he's going to be like killed. So it just looks really heavy, really harsh. But because they sneaked in, they saw that last scene of the movie, they stayed there and they watched the whole movie from the beginning to the end. So from the beginning, they saw the context. So that same guy was, raping people, murdering people, abusing people. So then when it comes to the last scene again, then they can understand, okay, that's why the last scene of the movie is this guy being executed, because of everything that he did before. So in the same way, when people act in this world, they don't see the whole movie. So someone does something wrong, and it is wrong, and they're getting away with it, and they're doing well. Have you ever seen people like that? They're behaving badly, and they're doing well. And some people think, well, hold on, then that means life's not fair, they're behaving badly, they seem to be getting away with it. No, but just give it time. Right? You just give it time. That same person who's behaving badly now, they will be the victim of that bad behavior in the future point, to teach them exactly what it's like to do that same thing. So there's a golden rule there. The golden rule is that you should treat people in the way that we would ourselves like to be treated, because not just because it's not because of this kind of weak concept of be a nice person, be nice to people, they'll smile at them, they'll like you. No, because actually you're preparing your own destiny by your own behavior. Does that make sense? Thank you. Give me another one. Anyone like to share a different one? Yes.
Oh, no, I just wanted to pick up because I think it's a really important point.
Sure.
Just about I've always thought there's a big difference between niceness and kindness.
Yes. Yes.
And there are lots of people who try and be nice, and so that you'll say, oh, she's such a nice person. And it's sometimes it's more annoying than someone just being outright rude to you. Like, it's false.
Yes.
At least there's honesty in this. Whereas when someone's really kind to you, it's coming from a deep place. It's such a nice feeling. Even though the person can sometimes be abrupt and rude, but you can kind of got a good heart.
That's a really good point. Yeah, and actually, a friend of mine told me actually here once about that. He said that sometimes people are nice because it's a form of getting away with things, right? He gave the example, he said it's like the guy who wants to always go down the pub, he doesn't want to spend time with his wife. So he goes down the pub, gets home, she argues, you never spend time with me. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, dear, you know, oh, you're right, you know, you mean the world to me, but he's just doing it to get her to calm down so he can go to the pub again next time, you know? So it's not really nice, it's just, I found a clever way to get what I want, you know, like that. It's not genuine. And this is also another point related to that. It requires, see, again, this seems a bit extreme, but to be deeply good, it requires knowledge. To know what's really in the best interest of another person requires knowledge and some courage to do that. I remember hearing about parents who would let their children do whatever they want. And do you think that that child grows up to be a healthy, wholesome and balanced person? No. Because that's another way of making the person come out of touch with reality. The reality is that when you go and throw a tantrum, the world doesn't care. Right? You know, I demand this and that, no, but who are you? No one cares. At home you demand it because your parents are sentimental, they just run around you. But when you take that attitude into the outside world, people just walk away. You know? So that parent didn't help that child. They were more interested in being liked than being actually loving. Because when we're loving, it means it's more than being popular, it's actually doing what's best for the particular individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah? It's a deeper kind of relationship or exchange. Anyone else have any comments? Michael?
I was wondering, if someone's not deeply spiritual, are you basically saying they can't be a man? Or they can't take, because if you're saying that to learn masculinity is coming from the supreme person, someone who's not really so spiritually inclined doesn't mean that they can't have real...
There's two things. One is, luckily, traditions and cultures are a means by which we can embed certain types of wisdom and understanding. So there's some things which are actually coming from spiritual sources, but because they've been followed by over time in tradition, they become a traditional way of behaving. Now that's a double-edged sword. I know many people who know about Eastern philosophy or culture, and after a while they reject it because they go into, like, let's say they go to a certain ceremony or they go to a spiritual place and they see people acting in a certain way, engaging in certain ceremonies, and they say, Mum, why do we do this? And I was like, oh, it's just our tradition, it's just what we do. So it's a tradition, and there may be a good reason for doing it, but because they don't know and they're intelligent, they think, well, how am I going to explain this? It just seems like we're following something blindly with no understanding as to why we do it. So after a while, what happens? They stop following. That doesn't mean that what they were following wasn't healthy, it means it wasn't explained why. So sometimes in traditions you've got wisdom which has been embedded, but at the same time it needs to be consciously explained. So you're doing this is the reason behind it. Then the person can follow with their intelligence. Does that make sense? So luckily for that reason, there are things which have been encoded in cultures and in traditions which will allow people to have a proper sense of, a healthy sense of masculinity. But at the same time, it does need to be studied and understood for it to be fully wholesome, so that you don't get like a mishmash, where you've got some things which are actually correct, mixed in with some things which are wrong, which is exactly like on your list, right? So use violence as a last resort. There is a place for violence in society, otherwise why do we have a police force, right? If your child is being abused, you want someone to come in and restrain that person who's abusing your child. So violence has a place, but not unrestricted violence, and not mindless violence for no reason. Violence has a place only where it's necessary to protect innocent people and for a greater good. Do you see the point? Yeah? So that's the understanding. So if people have a full knowledge of it through scripture, through traditions, they will be able to consciously do it, and that's most effective. If not, they catch a few points because it may be encoded in their tradition, but the danger is it could be mixed. So maybe some things which are really healthy aspects of masculinity mixed in with many, many unhealthy things. I'll give an example. I remember hearing like a couple of students speaking, and one of them was saying that women love men who beat them up. Right? Straight up. I was there. This is not like it's not a theory. I heard them speaking like that, Right? I didn't know the students, but one, oh yeah, but the truth is, women like when men treat them badly, like that. If you hit her, she'll come back to you, like that. Think about it. Yes, no, seriously. And if you think further, we even see examples of this even in the media, right? So there was a whole thing, Rihanna, right? It was all in the news. I remember reading on some news website just the other day, Rihanna and Chris Brown together in some club, etc., etc. Happens all the time. Right? So really something to bear in mind. There are healthier models of masculinity and femininity. If we want to get into that science, then we can be extremely powerful in what we do. Because the Vedas isn't, what you've come to, Vedic understanding is not politically correct. Right? So if anyone has the idea, this may not be the forum for you, because we'll be very honest. Just like there's a physical body and there are physical differences between men and women, there are also differences because there's a difference in the mentality, right? A difference in the psychology. And if people are honest and not trying to be kind of, you know, in denial, everyone knows that there's nothing wrong with the difference. The differences are useful and they can be healthy if they're used in a very positive way. But there are differences. So Vedic understanding says that these are the differences in the nature and these are how the natures go together in a healthy way. And if people who want to be in denial of that will never be able to have like a higher level of exchange or relationship. Yes?
Yeah, I remember hearing that, you know, it's like men and women in the Olympics, they have separate races, but no one calls it sexist.
Yeah.
So like on some level we do have to appreciate that there's difference.
Yeah. And if the differences are appreciated, then everyone can be very, very healthy. You see, the trouble is, in modern society, some things are appreciated and other things are not. So then, if you got like, if this was the idea of masculinity, think about what that means. If men really thought that this is how I should be to be masculine, then women would be abused a lot, and all the men would be chasing after whoever could be the most kind of, you know, ruthless or cunning or disrespectful. You see what I'm trying to say? So
actually,
that's what's required, a healthy understanding.
This kind of advocates dismantling people on a mental level, which could end up with a lot of really disturbed people.
What do you mean?
Yes.
Yes.
What it does is it mentions I forget where it is. Sorry. But it mentions that you should. I forget what it was, but it was something like you should kind of like, if you want to like dismantle someone or like you want them out of your way, you should kind of like make them doubt themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Or something, which could end up with like really bad stuff. Because I have a friend who has a really good sense of wit, and he's a really witty guy. And on the few times when he's been like assaulted by people who were trying to mug him, he's just like he's done that, but in a positive way. He's just like dismantled someone on a mental level. But I've also got another mate who just constantly takes the mick out of other people, and just it ends up like who just make people really insecure.
I remember being at university, and I remember one friend of mine was in a relationship with someone else, and the guy would always put her down about her weight, about how she looked, and it was deliberate. He was trying to make her feel insecure with the idea that if I can make her feel insecure, I can control her. Does it happen? Have you heard of that happening before?
Yes.
All happens all the time.
Sometimes the people that want to make people feel insecure is because they're massively insecure themselves.
Exactly, exactly. And even if they're not, by doing that to another person, the reaction is that something will happen in their own life which will really hit them and destroy their own sense of inner security. What we do to other people karmically, it must happen to us at some point in time. What goes around comes around. So it's a sign of foolishness and ignorance to mistreat people, because it does not. You will have to suffer the results of that at some future point. Yes.
I've always found whenever men put me down, it's always a sign that I've got more power than them.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they may feel that they may feel that you have, which is why they're trying to actually take disempower. Yeah.
I see it as almost a good sign. Like I think, maybe I've got you where I want you. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is obviously being a bit weak by trying to put me down. So.
It is weak, but at the same time, the danger is also that sometimes very insecure people, they do it and then they become so exaggerated in their insecurity that a lot of attacks and things of that nature happen because the person feels weak and they lash out in order to try and give themselves a perceived sense of power. So it's also a little bit dangerous, That's why it's better if people can be educated out of that than to, like that. Yes, Michael.
I was going to say, yeah, so how does a boy or male become mature? How can we use this to become mature?
So how
do we know when we've also hit maturity? What is that?
That's good. So we took a group, because the Launchpad group, we go to India once a year. We took a group to India, and myself, Michael and Kundalata, we had a meeting with one spiritual teacher, actually, a guru. And he actually does a lot of seminars on this topic, a great deal of knowledge on male-female psychology according to the Vedas. And one of the things he mentioned is that what was not learned by someone when they were young, that person can gain that same knowledge through their intelligence when they're older. In an ideal situation, growing up, we would see very healthy examples of that. Good role models of masculinity and femininity. But in some cases, that's not seen. But then through the knowledge, through assimilating that knowledge at a later time, practicing that knowledge, then actually we can develop that proper behavior. So it's about knowing the principles of what masculinity is, what femininity is, and how they interact in a healthy way. And practicing that, then you become adept at that particular area of life. Because anything where you have proper knowledge and you practice that knowledge, it becomes an art. You become, it becomes like second nature. It becomes a skill. And this is called realization. So knowledge is called gyan. But when you practice that knowledge properly and you become expert in applying that knowledge in different times, places and circumstances, then you've achieved what's called vigyan, or realization. So it's like, some of you may have seen that there's like classic movie, The Karate Kid. So you got the character, So you got the character who has to clean and do all these things. But by practice, he becomes intuitively good at defending himself because he's practiced the form so many times that he can do it instinctively in different situations. So knowledge is like that. And that's one of the things that Launchpad really want to do. What we feel very proud that we can give a huge amount of very deep, not knowledge, but wisdom that can transform people's lives if they apply it in their own lives properly. This is not everyone's got a theory, I've got my own self-improvement idea, they've got their own self-improvement idea, and they just spend the time reading books and then nothing works. This is very, very different. This is very potent stuff this is very potent wisdom coming since the dawn of reality itself, or the dawn of creation itself. Because the Vedas were actually present at that particular time. Okay, if you pick up their hands up, we'll start with B and then we'll take these two and we'll stand with yes.
Yeah, how do people healthily on the differences? Like, I think that there might be a fear of recognising differences because people think, oh, it's going to generate sexism, it's going to generate racism, so let's just pretend that everyone's exactly the same. I had a friend who used to recognise differences, but he would say, oh, men are more intelligent, or
that's not actually true.
So how do you do that healthily?
Yeah. So the thing is, it's about appreciation. People will share things about themselves if those things are appreciated. Yeah? So for example, there are differences in the psychology of males and females. It's actually considered that women are actually more practically intelligent than men, right? Because the way a woman's mind will think to get something done, she'll be able to get it done much faster. She'll find a shorter way to achieve the same goal than a man, generally. It's considered that men, in terms of psychology, their intelligence for abstract concepts is greater. Right? Now, even though these are trends which are considered there, you still have to accept or look at every person as an individual as well. Because that means that there'll be, even though women will be more practically intelligent than men, there'll be a man who's maybe more practically intelligent than a particular woman. And then vice versa, even though men will have a better abstract intelligence, what a particular woman X may have a superior abstract intelligence than particular man Y. Do you see the point? So you see that, you understand that there's a trend, but you still see the individual within that. Yeah? Then it's healthy. And if the masculine qualities and the feminine qualities are appreciated properly, then you'll find that people will express them. Right? I've seen situations where sometimes you have even women trying to copy unbalanced men. Right? Have you seen situations like that? In other words, the woman's trying to be pushy and dominant. There's a stupid man, he's being pushy and dominant, that's bad enough. And then she's copying him, so you've got two foolish people. Right? You see that point? So it's about knowing what balance is. And there is a time to be strong sometimes, for both men and women. Right? So the idea is that what's healthy based upon knowledge, and also it's important that men, actually, my spiritual teacher, when he wrote about this, there's a chapter in one of his books on relationships, and he said the reason why the world is in a mess right now is because there's a lack of feminine energy, right? Genuine feminine, nurturing qualities. He said there's a lack of feminine energy from the men and from the women, right? I'll give another example. Where I work, we sometimes work to place students with different companies. And I remember one of my female students, she told me, she said, I don't want to work in an office full of women, right? He said, because you work in an office full of women, they can be very catty or very bitchy. They'll say, talk about your clothes, or did you see her hair, you know, this and that. You see my point? Men won't do that. That's the difference, you know? So the reality is that there is a difference in psychology, but there's a higher level of that difference and a lower level. So we want to bring out the higher feminine aspects in both men and women, because now what happens is there are many men who are scared to be nurturing. There are many men who are scared to be sensitive and to be considerate because they think that it makes them seem weak. So then they don't show that side. So they're closing down their own feminine, their own healthy feminine side. Do you see the point? Yeah, and we're seeing that in men and women, unfortunately. Yeah, but that means that the person can't be happy, because if you're not balanced, you will not be happy. If you're imbalanced internally, you'll make unbalanced decisions which will lead to negative results in your own life and external world. Whatever we are inside, that's going to come out. Does that? You had a question, and I think Michael also. Anthony, yes.
Like within relationships, like some people need slightly, like some people want a more traditional man is the man and a woman is the woman, and then there are some women, even if they are quite balanced, they're naturally more, let's say, dominating, and the men are naturally like they're more organised and more able to get things done. And the women are more like. So how do you? Because obviously you've got this Vedic ideal that you were talking about. How do you kind of square it with individual differences?
Sure. We have to also. So there's two things. There's principle and there's detail. Right? And I remember hearing about this in one study about it. So what was being said is that yes, there are some women who are actually naturally very dominant. In the Vedic system, there's what's called Varna, which relates to the psychophysical nature. So there's one Varna which is called Kshatriya, which means warrior-like. So there's some women who are Kshatriyas, like very Kshatriyani, so they're very warrior-like. But generally it's said that those women, even though they're very strong and dominant, they still would prefer to be with a man who's also like them, but more so, like that, because then they can feel that sense of being protected and sheltered at the same time. But at the same time, obviously, like I said, we have to honor the individual differences of a person. So if there's a particular person who isn't like that, then that's just a reality of it. But as a general trend, that's considered there. So you have your millionairess who's the head of a multi-million-pound company. But she'll also be attracted to a man who's more dominant than she is. Generally. If that man's weak, then she won't be attracted. She'll feel, oh, he's weak. In my office, just a few days ago, one of my colleagues was kind of making fun. He's a female, Latoya. She was making fun of another colleague who's younger than her. He's a young man. And he's a little bit, he's sweet, but a little bit, maybe soft. And so she was telling him off about something, and he kept apologising, and she said to him, she said, don't apologise. If you apologise, I'll think you're weak and I'll try and take advantage of you. And she warned him, she said, if you do that in relationships, women will take advantage. She said that.
What about somebody naturally more feminine? Like what
What again? Oh, no, see, there's a science to it, right? Even if someone's naturally, like this traditionally more soft or feminine, it's still good if their partner is stronger than them, if that's a female, so that she can feel that she's with someone who's secure. She doesn't want to necessarily feel that there's someone who's weaker than her who she can push around. True or false?
Yes, definitely.
So this is actually explained in these Vedic texts. It's actually said like that. I know Michael had then Anthony, then P. Yes.
Just going back to the original question, in terms of like, what does it? How do you know when someone's mature? And does that mean that women should know about masculinity? In other words, basically, let's say he was advising like women who might want to get married, and we say make sure go with somebody who's mature.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? What symptoms? Like what list of symptoms or qualities would?
So there's two things. First of all, it's the scale. Because actually there's no end to how much we can grow and develop as individuals. So the term will be maturing. So what we're looking for when we want to actually, in the Vedic stance, it said it's healthy that when one looks for a relationship, they're looking for a relationship to actually make a commitment, not to just kind of, you know, have a bit of fun with different people, right? Because it actually affects the psychology in many subtle ways that people aren't aware of, and I'll come to that. So when it's time for, actually, when the person feels ready for a commitment, then you're looking for someone who's sufficiently mature and who you can mature further with. So some of the symptoms of that is that the person respects and values and looks after themselves properly. Right? It's considered that someone who's abusive towards themselves, how much are they going to be able to give to other people? Do you see what I'm trying to say? And there are many people like that. They mistreat themselves, abuse themselves, and then they try to get with someone else, and the person gets them thinking, I can change him. No, you can't change him. He's already messed up. So what's he gonna do? Seriously, it's not a joke. You can help him to sort himself out, but he has to want to sort himself out. That means the person isn't ready for a relationship. See, this is not like what you hear on TV. It's not like the sort, you know, I met her, you know, she was like this, and you know, I met him, I changed. No, it doesn't. That's not what happens in the real world. We want to bring people in touch with reality. The reality is that someone who's on drugs, who's abusing their own body, who's like lashing out, who can't control their temper, if you're with that person, you're going to be in trouble because the person isn't even in control of themselves. How are they going to treat you nicely? Do you see the point? Yeah. So that's the point. So this is the kind of thing we want to really have a proper understanding of. So mature, sufficiently mature means that they honour themselves properly and look after themselves properly. Another point is that they have sufficient knowledge about who they are and where they want to go. You're not looking for someone who you and that person just connect right now, because you're growing somewhere. So you have to see that their values and what they want to achieve, how they want to move forward in life, is also the same direction as you. Otherwise, you may meet at this point and you're okay, but eventually, what happens to the relationship? Everyone just goes apart. Right? Relationship means there's a long-term togetherness. That means the person has to know where they're going, you have to know where you're going, and you have to see that you're heading in a similar direction. Otherwise, your relationship will go blind to begin with. According to this guru who studied the literatures, the Vedic scriptures on male-female psychology, he said that when you get with someone just because of physical attraction, that kind of relationship will last at best case scenario, it will last for up to 3 years, best case scenario, right? Because after a while, the personality will become the prominent thing and you'll be disgusted. When you put people together, generally, because when the infatuation is very strong in the beginning period, we call this a mode of passion, that it doesn't matter how, unless the people are really, really, really extremely incompatible, it will feel nice to begin with, right? That man's on his best behavior, the woman's on their best behavior, whatever, the partner's on their best behavior, so in the beginning, you know, this and that. And it's artificial. Because when you're committed to someone, and let's say when you move in with someone, you're living in each other's space. It's not that you just see each other when you feel like it and then you go home, right? No, you're in that person's space on a day-to-day basis. So then you get to see what the person is really like. Generally what happens is, in this world, people will be trained for economics, they'll be trained for their career, so on, but when it comes to relationships, no one gets any training. And if you tell people you should learn the science, people are like, because they really believe it's like they hear on the, in the R&B songs, like, I met him, he looked at me and I just knew straight away he was the one. Really? Really?
How long did you? It's like the question you ask when you hear that song is like, how long did you stay with him for?
Every song is seems to be the
exactly.
Person.
Yeah, the next track. Yeah, the next track. Yeah. They had a few relationships in the same album. So it's exactly what's going on. So mature means they care for themselves sufficiently. Someone who does not care for themselves sufficiently will not be able to care for a partner sufficiently. If they're abuses of themselves, they're not going to be able to have much to share with another person. Another thing, someone who has knowledge of what they are, right? According to the Vedas, we are actually spiritual beings having a material experience. We are a soul, but we have a physical body and a subtle body, right? So we have a type of psychology and we have a type of physical body. But there's a science to also knowing what your particular nature needs. Based upon the kind of psychology you have, what do you need? If someone's a very dominant female and you put her with a very weak and submissive male, do you think she's going to be happy, yes or no? She won't be happy because she knows I need this for it to work. Even knowing about what you need in terms of physical attraction, that's important. It's not the all in all, but it does play a role. So these things are there, you know. And even if someone doesn't know all these things themselves, by association, if you find people who are wise in this area, you can take advice and move forward. So they should be self-aware, they should be caring for themselves, and they should want to make a commitment. Again, people don't like that. They want to hear, oh, you know, just have a few relationships and play around. But actually, you create certain karma when you do that. Because when you play around with other people's emotions, for one person, they're playing around. For the other person, it's serious, isn't it? Right? In many cases, it's like that. I remember being at school, I remember there was one guy, and he was kind of like the alpha, he was one of the alpha males at the school. And he went out with this girl called Arlene, who actually most of the guys really liked Arlene, right? But she went out with him. She completely crushed him. I mean, when he became so attached to her, when she left him, crushed him. He was the kind of like, you know, I'm the alpha male, I'm this and that. But no, she just completely crushed him, right? Now, it also works the other side. Because every time a man mistreats a woman, it makes it harder for that same woman to trust another male, right? And you've heard that before sometimes. Women say, no, I don't trust men, or, you know, relationships like this or that, because, you know, these guys are like this. That's because she's been mistreated, right? And therefore, in the next relationship, it's harder. What to speak of the subtle psychological effects, also what can happen in terms of the kind of living entity that will take birth to that woman based upon her own psychology. Again, these are things that you will never hear in normal circles, because this is very deep, rare, metaphysical and spiritual knowledge. For example, when a woman has, when a partnership give birth to a son, the male child takes on the psychology of the mother. Right? This is given in one literature called the Bhagavad Purana.
How about the female?
Yeah, the female takes on the mentality of the father. Yeah. Of course, there's always modification based upon the experience the person has subsequently, but that's the case. The living entities who are born into a particular family are not an accident. It's not like, you know, oh, we just happen to have that. There's a science to it, right? There's a science to it. Even the meditation that the man and woman are having when they come together for procreation will impact upon the type of living entity that takes birth from that union. There's a science to it. This is written in Vedic literatures which are thousands of years old. It's just people don't know. Right? So when you read your Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, the person who wrote that, he's a spiritual person. He's taken that from ancient literatures, but packaged it in such a way that people can accept it. That's where he got it from. Right? And there's more than that in these same Vedic literatures. That's what's going on. Who else had their hand? I think Anthony had his hand up.
Sorry, it's been sufficiently old to answer the question. Just one, who was it that you were talking about that was looking at the psychology of masculine and feminine energy?
Oh, Bhakti Vidya Purnamara.
I liked it.
Yeah.
Is it on ISKCON?
Yeah, his seminars were on there. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah. Yes.
So like, there are relationships that have gone on for like 5-10 years.
Mm-hmm.
People seem happy in those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say they're not married.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say about those relationships?
Well, it depends. See, have you ever known someone who's with someone just because they're secure, by being, it's a comfortable thing. They've got used to being with that person. Raise your hand if you've known someone like that. Okay. Let's ask another question. Have you ever known someone who's in a relationship and you can see that it's suboptimal, but they just settle for it because they're scared that if they leave that person, they won't find someone else? Raise your hand if you've ever heard of people do that? Yeah. So you understand what I'm saying? It happens all the time. I've seen so many, because again, people don't know the science and people are insecure. Yeah. You don't have to be like that. There are high levels of relationship, but if people don't know, then sometimes like whoever I find who will take me, I'll cling to that person because I'm scared that if I let go of that relationship, no one else will take me.
Yeah. But exactly.
So it's not optimal.
But the funny thing about that is some of those people aren't always willing to take commitments, like as in marriage.
Yeah.
So there's that. What would you say about that? It's not. Yeah.
So the thing is, ultimately, it is advised that relationships should end in that kind of commitment, in the marriage commitment, because, see, again, Actually, you could argue that it doesn't. Why actually? There's no reason why it should. And you're right. You could say that there's no reason why a relationship should be committed. And you're right, depending on your goal. When we say these things, we're saying it with a certain context. The Vedas have a goal. The Vedas say that the ultimate goal is to actually become fully spiritually happy. Therefore, in reference to that goal, certain things are advised and certain things are not advised. Right? So if you don't accept the goal, if you don't want to go for the goal of being completely happy, and recognizing and honoring your spiritual nature, then you can do different things, but then you're still in that cycle of karma. Right? Because if it's not committal, then it's actually very dangerous for you and your partner. Right? Because it also it breeds a certain mentality. The mentality is that I go to get what I can out of people and out of relationship rather than being responsible and trying to give. Yeah? And it's not that it will happen just in your relationship, because the mentality that one cultivates, they bring that to every situation they're in. So if I'm used to being exploitative, I remember guys who would just exploit women. Right? I remember when I was at university, one guy in particular, he would just use women and then throw them aside. So you say, well, okay, it's bad, but but he's still a nice guy in other areas. But the mentality he's breeding is how to take advantage of people. He's using it on women in particular, but that mentality is the mentality he brings to every situation. So you can't tell me that when he's in a job and there's an opportunity to exploit, he's not going to take it. Because what he's cultivating is exploitative mentality, period. Not just in relationships. It's not like, I'm a really nice guy in one area, but I'll exploit this. No. You see that in the movies, right? In the movies you see that, what I do in one area is completely separate from everything else. No, it's not. But in reality, it's not. Because the thought pattern is a habit. Just as you have habits of action, there's a habit of thinking. So the habit of thinking is, let me go and see what I can get out of other people rather than what I can give. So therefore, you're going to also use it in other areas, and it comes back to you, because then you will be mistreated. There are many men in this world who are being mistreated in their relationships because they, in their previous life, mistreated others. So it's not an accident. So what happens is, the best way to teach that person what it's like is to put them in the situation to see. You've abused and mistreated other people, so now I'm going to put you in that situation and you're going to be mistreated and abused, so you can feel, not just intellectually understand, but you get a direct 360-degree, three-dimensional experience of what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that bad behavior. Yeah? So the idea is that we want to ideally be people who develop a different kind of mentality. Commitment, responsibility, selflessness. Right? Because if we're able to give, you experience the joy of giving, and even materially and karmically, because you've given, what happens to you? Yeah. And you don't receive the same amount that you gave. You receive more than you actually gave. Right? So if you had a society or a culture or a relationship or any kind of group, community, where everyone's in the mood of giving and sharing, do you think those people will be happy? Do you think those people will be strong? Okay? I'm doing a presentation at Shell on the 30th. It's about networking. And the whole concept is how to build a community of lifelong friends. And in all these books on networking, the top sellers, their basic principle is look after people and help people. Because if you do that, everyone will like you, and you have a vibrant interaction. But the kind of more shark kind of, let me go, I'll smile at her and be nice because I want something, that doesn't actually work. Right? Have you ever known someone who you can see them coming a mile off, this person wants something? Yes. Right? Isn't it? And it's so clear. I mean, it's like, I am coming to exploit. It's just like a rich girl of a t-shirt.
It's so annoying.
Yeah.
It's annoying.
Yeah. And after a while, you try to avoid that person.
Yeah.
And they think they're being I'm being really clever and no, you're just being a fool. Because everyone can see that you're a cheat. No one wants to be around you.
The funniest thing to say to those kind of people is that the second they say, what do you want?
Yeah.
I've done that before, and they've been like, what? And just like, I have to go.
Yeah. But then it's worse than that, because they destroy their own mentality by creating that habit, and they will be exploited. They'll be exploited. They'll see what it's like when people only approach them because they want something, and they'll become disgusted with it themselves eventually. Who else said that? Yes, Panji.
I'm sure you've already covered this in some place. I'm sorry.
No, go for it. Go for it.
Where do ideas of feminism fit into this?
Okay, well, it depends. How would you define feminism?
So, at the most sort of broad or extreme example, women's emancipation. So.
Okay, sure. So I'm going to say something that our founder. Yeah. Let me explain what a founder means. Founder Acharya is the person, the guru who brought this ancient tradition, which was practiced, for thousands of years, but who brought it to the West in the modern context. His big thing was that actually men tried to exploit women in the name of emancipation, right? His thing was that actually, and he really backed it up with a lot of kind of reasoned argument, that in the name of emancipation, in the Vedic age, women were always protected, right? Not subjugated, not exploited, but protected. So in this age, the idea of the men is that, no, tell the women that they should be independent, because as long as they're independent, they have no one looking after them, looking over them, protecting them, so it's easier for us to go and take advantage of the women. Yeah? That's what he said on the whole idea of emancipation. The idea, therefore, to put it in a better context, is that there should be respect for all the sexes, right? But real respect. Not exploitation, not that we try and pretend that women should be, so-called emancipated, but really I just want to exploit that woman. So let's get her in a situation where she's not looked after by people who care about her, because then as long as they're not around, it's easier for me to go and then mistreat her and then walk away to another woman, And it creates what's called Varna Shankara. It's considered that when women exploit, especially sexually, the children who are born of that union, because the mentality of the male was just let me exploit that woman, that child's mentality will also carry that pattern of it's all about me, it's all about exploitation. When you have a society where people are committed, the souls which take birth in those unions will also be of a mentality which is more committed and more responsible. It's a very, very ancient science, but it does work. Many of my friends who've had children, they've studied this, and they use that science. And if you look at their children are very different to the norm. Those children know who they are very early on, strong personality, and they like to give. Right? From birth, you see that those children like to give. It's not like, generally, maybe sometimes, there'll be a little bit of exception to the rule, but generally those children like to give. So this is what the world doesn't know. There's a science to parenting, and the children that take birth in a particular situation are not accidental. Because the mentality of the male and female when they came together is also drawing in a particular type of living entity to take birth in that particular family. It's not an accident. Yeah? So the men actually should look after women properly. That's the bottom line. Yeah? But that means not that they can push them around, not that they can exploit them. They have to care for them, be considerate of their nature, sensitive to their needs, and they should appreciate the femininity and women for what they are. Not try and make them push them around to be male or anything like that. It doesn't work. Questions? I think B then Gokon.
I have something kind of on the same line.
On the same line? But do you have something on the same line?
Yes.
Oh. Okay, then go.
Yeah. I just wanted to add at university, I remember I had on housemate, and she told me that she went away for a week to spend some time at university to see what it was like before she chose to go to it. And so she was out, and she was with a group of random people from other sixth form colleges who also gone to uni to see if they wanted to go there. And she said that so they got quite drunk, and then what happened is that she was with a guy who she thought was taking her back to her accommodation.
Yeah, he said he would take her home, right?
Yeah, he said he would take her home. And then what happened is he actually took her back to his accommodation, and then he actually raped her. So I think it's I think it's quite a vivid example of how women can get abused and taken advantage of, and how that protective element is actually very, very useful. And
that happens a lot more than people report. Yeah. There are many instances where women are sexually assaulted. I mean, now there's a big thing in the news about Jimmy Savile, right? And when I read it on the BBC website, it says over 200 women have come forward to say that they were sexually assaulted by Jimmy Savile. Over 200. I mean, yeah, well,
has it gone up?
Over 200. And I saw there was on the BBC website there was one person who actually spoke about an instance with that person themselves had with him, and he would sometimes go into like prisons or nursing homes and stuff like that, and insult people. And because he was like a so-called star, no one said anything.
Yeah, he paid them off, didn't he?
Yeah. See, it happens. That's what I'm saying. It happens all the time. There are many people, they've been abused so much, and they've been made to think it's their fault, that they feel embarrassed and ashamed to even go and report it.
Did he used to drug people, or did he?
I don't know about the drugging, but he would just blatantly assault them, and he was approached about it. Because there's now a full inquiry taking place in the BBC about it. So some people actually approached him. I saw one person who said that they said to him one day, I said to him, Jimmy Savile, what's all this I hear about you? And because he would go for underage girls. He had a thing about young girls. And Jimmy Savile says all a load of rubbish, blah, 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 blah. It happens all the time. There are many women in universities who are sexually assaulted and they don't tell anyone. You know,
the statistics of universities are unbelievable.
Yeah. It's very serious. So this is the point. That's where the Vedic systems come from. There's a reference point. It's not that life's just all about just going around like, you know, in circles. There's a purpose to it. We should try and make spiritual progress and become fully spiritually realized. So in reference to that, then how do you do the other things to help you to achieve that ultimate goal? That's the point. So that's what we're trying to touch upon now. It's new. It may not be the most well-known or politically correct idea, but that's a very deep understanding. And if we know that and move towards that, then it's considered the one will be truly happy. Otherwise, you get all kinds of the imbalances which are going on in the world today. Who else had their hand up? Go for it, yes.
There was, I read, I forget what it was, but I think it was a paper on feminism, and said that during the time that feminism was really kicking off, there were a lot of men who were like really behind it, but a lot of them were interviewed after, and it was because they were behind it so that women would be more independent and felt freer, so they would be more open to having relationships with men. So there wouldn't be that whole kind of barrier of I want my family to be involved.
You have to meet my mom and dad. You have to come meet my brothers. Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, you have to think that the need for emancipation came from this idea of masculinity. Like this idea of masculinity kind of forced the idea that they need to be emancipated because they were so repressed. So.
Yeah, because and that's but see also it's said that the reason why these things happen, why there's some movement for emancipation, is because the men don't behave properly. It's actually considered that men have to be properly trained. So the same guru who's talking about it said that women mature faster than men. Right? That's also in the Vedic literatures. So because they mature faster, a girl will naturally become a woman. But a man, he said that he's a boy at first, and then he becomes a punk, and if he's trained, then he becomes a man. Otherwise, he just stays at the punk platform. That's what he said. So without training, it's that's what he said.
I know a lot.
Yeah. So that's the point. That was the reason behind it. If the men don't behave properly, then they tend to exploit the women. That's also mentioned in the literature called the Bhagavad Gita. That's one of the points that one of the main characters, Arjuna, puts towards Krishna as to why he doesn't want to fight. Because then if he fights and kills the males, then those women will be unprotected. And if they're unprotected, then they'll be exploited. That's the point. Other questions, comments? Kay and then Michael. Yes.
Okay. Maybe it's a bit off topic, but it's to do with giving and receiving.
Yeah, please.
I kind of came across the concept of like tithing and stuff, and
yes.
Giving, and like someone was saying that their money flows better, like in and out of their life when they tithe, but they notice that if they don't, then it doesn't flow as easier. So it's kind of like, what do the Vedas say about stuff like that?
So let me explain. First of all, tithing is a Christian concept. In the Bible, it said that you're meant to give 10% of your income to God for God-conscious purposes. That's what tithing was. And in the Vedas, it has, in all traditions, in all genuine spiritual traditions, this concept is there. The concept is based upon the idea that actually everything's coming from the Supreme Person. So it's not actually ours. We can, someone can go and till the land and lay claim to, I grew these crops, but the seeds weren't created by human beings. The land wasn't created by human beings. We mix the ingredients which have been given by someone else, and then we claim the produce. So the idea is that if we still need to use these things in the world because we have to maintain ourselves. That's not a problem. But if we offer them back to the Supreme Person by using them in a spiritual way and by engaging them in spiritual activity, then what happens is a few things. Because money is ultimate and wealth is ultimately an energy, if you pass it on, it comes back to you. Yeah? So this is in the Vedas, this is called Lakshmi, right? The principle of wealth or fortune. That if you bring Lakshmi, wealth, fortune, to the Supreme Person who is her eternal partner, then she's happy and you get more and more. But if you try and take her away, then she actually leaves you completely. That's why many charities, many big companies, they always give to charity. They know the principle. They know that if they give, it will come back to them. But if they try and hoard it all, they lose everything. So it is actually a principle, yeah. If money can be, like for example, a simple way of looking at it. So in the Vedic culture, for example, we all cook something vegetarian and we'll offer it to God with a prayer. So that money is used to cook a meal, or used to buy ingredients for a meal. So we're going to eat anyway, but now, because I've used that money to buy a meal that I'm going to offer to God, because you accept vegetarian foods, I offer vegetarian foods only to God, then that money has now become spiritualized because it's been used in a spiritual way. Yeah? And therefore, it's considered that many more, the abundance will always be there, like that. But if we use it just in a selfish way, we can lose. We can often lose what we have. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay, so I think it's a good place to stop. So? Yeah, we should definitely do kirtan. So what we like to do in these Launchpad sessions is to always have a section of spiritual mantra meditation. I think who would lead? Do you like to lead? Oh, Panchali, yeah, maybe you could lead the kirtan. Just to explain what kirtan is, I think some of you went to an event last Saturday, yeah? So there was it's a kirtan event where you sing back that same mantra in that same melody, and by meditating on that sound, it's on one level very artistically and creatively, nourishing and attractive, but it does more than that. It also helps to elevate our consciousness or our mentality and helps us to tune into higher spiritual levels of awareness and reality as well. So it's a very powerful way of connecting with the Supreme, and we'd like to do that to wrap up the session. So I'm going to ask maybe Panchali if we can get do we have an accordion? Okay, should we bring this over? Reading it and studying it in more detail, because also some people who've been coming have requested that they want to go a bit deeper into the text and the meaning and how they can apply it, the meditation, the mantra meditation, etc. So that will also be happening as well. It won't happen, I think, for another 2 weeks, yeah, because just the way the timetabling or scheduling is. But we'll let you know about that. So then, if you want to come into those, because it won't be as interactive. It'll be more lecture based and more like reading and studying. But for those who would like to come and get into that aspect more, anyone and everyone is welcome. So I have a slightly different flavour, to these sessions, but it will also add another depth of dimension to it for whoever wants to take part. So we'll be passing on more information about that. And it was really nice to see all of you. Thank you all for participating. The mood in Launchpad is that the session is really only as good as the people who come. So I found it very inspiring because everyone was sharing so many wonderful points and engaging themselves so deeply in the process. So it was really, really infusing. I found it. So we hope you will come again and we can continue to serve you. Like that. Okay, are there any other announcements that we haven't? What we'll also do is last year we took a group to Mayapur, which is in West Bengal in India, for a special retreat. And like the guru that I mentioned, Bhaktivedanta Maharaj, he's based there, and they met with other gurus as well. I mean, the whole group didn't meet him, we met him, but because his timetable was a bit tight. But we're looking to see if we can do that again for next year, 2013. So if you're interested, let us know. Like we did last year, it was a very packed schedule, very exciting series of presentations and trips to different places, and maybe we'll get some of the people who went last year to also explain what their experiences were. But we'd highly recommend it if you can come, like that. Obviously, it's good to let you know early, because if we go, it'll probably be around February, March time, or when would that be?
Probably towards latter end of the year.
Oh, okay. Okay, well that gives actually plenty of time.
Yeah.
Okay, but then we'll keep you informed of the dates. But if you're interested in coming, then maybe it's good to start pulling a little something away just so that that's there. And because it'll be towards the end of the year, that'll give more time to to prepare as well. Yeah. So there should be very good trips. Yes.
And then average cost?
Did people pay last time?
Around about 600, 750 is a good number
that
to
includes flight, accommodation,
all the activities.
Yeah.
How long was it around?
It was 10 days.
About 10 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we can promise you it'll be a very powerful trip, transformative. Yeah. And actually, because we've been doing it a few times, when people come now, they get a better experience, because we're always learning and adding new additions onto the programs and so on. So if you'd like to come, we'd love to take you to I guess you could call it mystical India. It's not the same as if you're going on like a tourist trip, because we know the people, we know the place. You get to see in a very kind of deep one-to-one way. You get to meet people who live there as part of their lifestyle. It won't be like a tourist package. You get to really interact with the villages. We took a boat across the river Ganga, and we were feeding the villagers. And actually, they would have music as we were coming to feed them. They'd sit in rows, and we actually engaged in that activity. We sponsored also the feast as part of the package. So you get to also do some outreach work as part of that as well. So just to give you a heads up, there'll be many other exciting things coming up in the Launchpad program. So yeah, the sky's the limit, and thank you so much for coming. It was really nice having an association.
Thank you for the welcome.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you to Charlie. Thank you to our good friend Gopal for playing the Madanga.